Well, this is our 13th session regarding the book of Job, and God willing, if everything goes according to plan, we'll have 3 more sessions, including this one. Rarely do things go according to plan, though, but I do plan to have 2 more following this one. We will conclude again with what James has to say about Job. But today, the reason we concluded the way we did in our last session, remember, considering what Jesus said about where the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered together. And we tried to emphasize the point that, to me, what that was suggesting to me, at the very least, with the case of Job, that was a conclusion of all of these previous questions. In other words, all that has transpired before this is closed. It's done away with. That was the end times of that conversation. So as we move into the duration of what God says, we must understand this is a completely different paradigm. It certainly seems like that to me. And so, again, as we concluded in our last session, essentially this is a transition from the end of the age, the end of days, into judgment, where we see that right off the bat. Then the Lord answered Job. Moreover, the Lord answered Job and said, "Shall the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? He who rebukes God, let him answer so." God's been speaking. Remember, he initially came out of the whirlwind, and he said to prepare yourself like a man. He will again. And then he goes on his seemingly tirade of many, many questions, many deep and profound questions, considering his nature, the nature he's created and so forth. And then he kind of stops and gives Job the opportunity he's been crying for the whole book. Here's your chance, Job. You've been seeking to vindicate yourself. Here's your chance. I've asked you all these questions. Now is the judgment. Shall the one who contends with the Almighty, Job, you seem to be contending with me. You seem to certainly accuse me of malice. And why am I not judging the wicked and you instead, and so forth? Is the one who contends with the Almighty, let him correct him. Now, Job himself had said in chapter 21, verse 22, he asked, "Can anyone teach God knowledge, since he judges those on high?" So this is something that the Christian must remember. We might remember things, we might internalize things in our minds, yet they don't always penetrate as much as they should in our hearts. So ultimately, this indicates to me God is really opening the conscience of Job. He is not done yet. Okay, he is not done yet. But he's giving Job an opportunity right now for his defense. Again, this is what you've been looking for. This is what you've been waiting for. You wanted a mediator and so forth. Here's your chance. You've been waiting for me to speak. I have spoken. Now what do you have to say? Answer me. Correct me. Then Job answered the Lord and said, "Behold, I am vile." This word is translated vile. The Hebrew is kalel, but it's translated vile only 4 times. It's translated curse 39 times. Ultimately, what he's saying here is exactly what Isaiah said in the temple. Woe is me. Behold, I am cursed. This is my defense. I have no defense. You have spoken, Lord, and if you jump over to chapter 42, you get a glimpse as to what Job is feeling now, but then it's far more expansive, because the final series of questions God has for Job truly completes Job, completes his sanctification, completes his understanding as to who God is and what he's doing and so forth, okay? But right now, Job is saying, "Behold, I am cursed. I have awakened now. What shall I answer you?" This is a complete different character now. We've seen throughout the whole Bible, he wanted his court case with God. He wanted to speak to God. And here's his one opportunity. And he realizes, what shall I answer you? What can I possibly say? No, that was rather convincing. That was rather convincing. I see what you were saying through your nature. Now, we also want to make the point again, the way we interpreted even those passages with creation and so on are going to be different in these series of questions. And we will get to that and the reason why and so forth. These two chapters leading into the Behemoth and Leviathan, he prefaces, I think, with an indication as to how we might interpret them. But Job is saying, behold, I am cursed. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand over my mouth. Once I have spoken, but I will not answer. Yes, twice, but I will proceed no further. So he's putting his hand over his mouth. Almost, remember, God had just spoken about the horse. And Job is essentially saying, okay, I'm putting my bridle in my mouth now. Just lead me. Right? I'm ready to be done with this. I submit to your truth and to your wisdom, my God. Once I have spoken, but I will not answer. Yes, twice, but I will proceed no further. So once I've spoken, through this whole account, through this whole book, he's been speaking really out of knowledge, out of turn, so to speak. He's been contending with the Almighty, essentially. But I will not answer. I'm done with my court case, okay? I see that I cannot vindicate myself. You are the only one who can vindicate me. Yes, twice, but I will proceed no further. Now, many people think that this is because he's saying yes twice because he's spoken more than just once. But I think he's saying yes twice, like right now, okay? Once I've spoken about, but I will not answer. Okay, yes, I just did speak, but I will proceed no further. No more, okay, God? I'm putting my hand over my mouth. The bridle is in. Steer. Jesus, take the wheel. And so, as it were. That was a terrible reference. Okay, going on to verse 6. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, now, he goes back to the same original mode. Okay, so remember, the first whirlwind as I saw it was out of all of the confusion, out of all the dark counsel that was coming from Job and his friends. Less so with Elihu, but certainly a whirlwind, a tornado, a storm of confusion, and God comes out of that. This one, I think, is a whirlwind of conviction. Job says, I will speak no further. So I see these as two different whirlwinds. It's a somewhat more peaceful one, but it's far more piercing and convicting. This is now Job. The first time God came to Job, you have to assume there was some part of Job is thinking, yes, finally, now I get my chance. And now this whirlwind is completely different. Now he knows, okay, I have no chance here. I cannot contend with the Almighty. Okay, and so this is a different whirlwind. That's all I'm saying. Now, God says here again, now prepare yourself like a man, gird yourself. I will question you and you shall answer me. This is the exact same introduction. However, again, Job knows he is not prepared for this. He thought he prepared. He had his vindication ready to go, ready for God to come so he can vindicate himself. And yet here, now he realizes there's no way to prepare myself for this. Okay, there was no way for me to prepare myself for what you had said before. How is it possible that I might prepare myself now? Nothing has changed other than my conviction. Now, this series of questions, 8 through 14, lead into the interpretation of the Behemoth and the Leviathan. God willing, we will actually consider Leviathan next week because I think there's just much more to Leviathan. I'll have something to say about that fairly briefly towards the end of this. But this is leading into how we see the Behemoth and Leviathan. So he begins, would you indeed annul my judgment? Would you would you condemn me that you may be justified? Now, this is typically why people seek to annul his judgment and condemn him that we might be justified. Many times when we think God is unfair, or we want to partake in a particular sin, we see God as absolutely unjust in hating this particular sin. And so we condemn him for this kind of strict law kind of a thing. You are shackling me. You are imprisoning me. I'm supposed to be free. This whole free will kind of a thing. And so we condemn God to justify ourselves. And ultimately, that's what Job has been doing. Would you indeed annul my judgment? Cancel it. Would you make it null and void? And would you condemn me that you may be justified? Now, this verse 8, really has to do with the justice of God. So again, God is absolutely just, but he's essentially asking Job, and he's asking all of us, would you indeed annul my judgment, the judge of heaven and earth? Would you seek to truly do this? Now, again, we wouldn't outlandishly do this. You know, it'd be a rare occurrence for a Christian anyway to say, God, how dare you keep me from adultery or something. I mean, that's a big sin. And so it would be probably some sort of peccadillo we want to partake in, and we know we're not allowed to. And so we just condemn God for his judgments and so forth to justify ourselves in doing this sin. So, but this, again, this is the heart and the mind of Job, and this is the heart and the mind of all people, Christian or otherwise. Verse 9 goes into his power. Have you an arm like God? And here is where the thunder, and this is something that Elihu had suggested. Or can you thunder with a voice like his? Now, have you an arm like God? Again, he is absolutely omnipotent. So, can you judge like I can? You haven't the wisdom, nor do you have the power. Because this will go into the rest of this strophe as well. So, have you an arm like God, or can you thunder with a voice like his? Again, here's where even God is equating somewhat his voice with the thunder. Thunder is kind of a piercing thing. It can be, again, it shakes. It can shake a man to his core, and ultimately there's nothing that causes fear and trembling like the voice of the Almighty. Verse 10. Now, verse 10 verse 10 really has to do with beauty. So then adorn yourself with majesty and splendor, and array yourself with glory and beauty. So if you can actually judge, if you have the wisdom and discernment and the ability and the power to do so, then adorn yourself with majesty and splendor, and array yourself with glory and beauty. In other words, this is how God arrays himself. The beauty of God, beauty in general, the aesthetics, there's something to beauty. The Protestant church, I think, has gone in the complete opposite direction because we are remonstrating so much against the Catholic Church's ornate churches. They've got the stained glass windows, they've got gold statues, they've got, the gold ark and so forth. They've got these gold censers and all sorts of gold, all sorts of adornments and so forth. And I think that can lead into a certain amount of idolatry, but it doesn't have to. Protestants have gone the other direction and just worship in bland, gray, boring, dull settings. Beauty is from God. So we must not worship beauty. We must worship the God of beauty in beauty. There's nothing wrong with an ornate church and a beautiful, God-inspired and God-honoring church, even in decoration. Now, the Protestants do say that the pulpit must be in the center because this is the way in which God speaks to his people. But God here is essentially showing Job that he can't judge like him, he hasn't an arm like him, and he hasn't the beauty and the splendor as God. The rest of these verses up to verse 14 has to do with God's dominion. Verse 11. Disperse the rage of your wrath. Look on everyone who is proud and humble him. Look on everyone who is proud and bring him low. Tread down the wicked in their place. Hide them in the dust forever. Bind their faces in hidden darkness. Then I will also confess to you that your own right hand can save you. So, 11, disperse the rage of your wrath. Look on everyone who is proud and humble him. The Bible has much to say about the proud and the pride of mankind, so I wanted to kind of give you a few. Psalm 94, verse 2, rise up, O Lord, judge of the earth, render punishment to the proud. Psalm 140, verse 5, the proud have hidden a snare for me and cords. They have spread a net by the wayside. They have set traps for me. This is what the proud do. Proverbs 15:25, the Lord will destroy the house of the proud, but he will establish the boundary of the widow. Proverbs 16:19, better to be of a humble spirit with the lowly than to divide the spoil with the proud. And lastly, Isaiah 2:12 says, for the day of the Lord of hosts shall come upon everything proud and lofty, upon everything lifted up, and it shall be brought low. Remember, he exalts the humble. He exalts the humble, and he brings low the exalted and the proud. So I want to just make it clear here, pride is wickedness, and wickedness is pride. Whatever wickedness you partake in just naturally involves pride, because you are essentially rebelling. You are making yourself to be God. When you are acting with impunity against the authority and the sovereignty of God, you make yourself God yourself. This is the pride of mankind. This is the pride of mankind that he is going to bring down. In Leviticus 26, verse 19, I will break the pride of your power. So this is when he's warning the Israelites. This is a warning to the church as well, okay? Because he's essentially saying, if you don't obey me, I'm going to do this. And if you continue not to obey me, I'm going to make it more severe. And if you continue not to obey me, I'm going to make it even more severe. But in verse 19, he says, I will break the pride of your power. I will make your heavens like iron and your earth like bronze. In Proverbs 16, verse 18, this is a pretty popular one. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. So now what God is saying here, so disperse the rage of your wrath. Again, if you are almighty, if you're able to do this, if you have the strength, the beauty, the splendor, and the wisdom to do this, then disperse the rage of your wrath. In other words, according to God's wise judgment, according to his omnipotent arm, according to his beauty and splendor, he is going to disperse the rage of his wrath. And he's essentially saying, Job, if you are the Almighty, you must have wrath. So disperse it. Look on everyone who is proud and humble him. So everyone who all the proud who God just looks at, by that he will bring them low. Likewise, in repentance, a sheer glance from God lifts us into his glory and into his image and into his light. So his look, just like the gospel, can pierce for and it can pierce against. So look on everyone who is proud and bring him low. Again, the exalted will be brought low. Just as Mary said in the Magnificat, tread down the wicked in their place. This is essentially putting them in the grave and then treading upon them as they are in the grave. Hide them in the dust forever. From the dust they came, to the dust they will return. These are the carcasses that will be lying where the eagles will be gathered together and so forth. Interestingly, it's also it gives the same illustration to me anyway of when Moses buried that Egyptian in the sand, in the dust, hiding the Egyptian, as it were. God is telling Job that, this is part of what I'm going to do. Not technically hiding so that nobody, but essentially you will be able to see them no longer. They're just going to be gone and destroyed. Bind their faces in hidden darkness. Now, this has to do with an execution. Back in the day, Haman had to deal with this. So in the book of Esther, he had to deal with this before he was executed. So they would cover your face before they execute. So that's what he's saying. Bind their faces in hidden darkness. First of all, before they're executed. And secondly, and most urgently, absolute darkness forever. The outer darkness. Okay. Then I will also confess to you. Also, Lazarus, his face was completely covered. Remember, they cover the entire body. And so when Christ said to loose him obviously, he had already died, and so this is a two-way situation as well. Some, the goats on his left hand, he will bind in hidden darkness and cover their faces and so forth. The sheep on his right hand, he will remove their blindness, give them eyes to see, and lift them into glory. There's no clear difference as to God's judgment for the just and the unjust. So this is God's conclusion. If you can do all this, then I will confess to you that your own right hand can save you. None of us, I hope now, again, this is monergism coming from God himself to his servant Job. None of us can save ourselves. God saves, and that is what he is doing to his servant Job. Now, we wanted to spend most of the time there, because I think, again, not only this sets up the rest of the book, but this is what Job needed to hear. He's not likening anything to the heavens or the beasts of the field or the fish in the sea or the birds of the air or anything like that. He is speaking to Job specifically, directly, without horns, as it were, non-cornutum. I don't know if you remember that, but without horns, he's speaking plainly. So now, 15. Now, look now at the behemoth, which I made along with you. He eats grass like an ox. Okay. The behemoth, there are many different interpretations. Many people differ as to what this behemoth is. Is it a specific animal? Some people say it's the cattle. Some people think, we've mentioned this, the hippopotamus. Some people think the elephant. Because we want to, God isn't bringing up an animal that Job wouldn't know. That wouldn't make any sense. Okay, so it must be a reference to something Job knows. Now in the Hebrew, it's kind of mixed. It's kind of the beast of beasts, or it can just be a word for many cattle, but it's essentially the beast of the beasts. Now this one that he's illustrating is huge, is massive and very strong. However, he eats grass like an ox, so he's absolutely safe. There's no danger pending with it. So think of like an elephant, because a hippopotamus can get kind of angry and crush you, and that wouldn't be fun. But an elephant, many animals travel around with the elephants. Compare that to the lion. No animals are traveling with the lions. But the elephants, many animals, traverse the lands and so forth with the elephants because they're herbivores. So this huge beast that might spark fear, God is saying, look, I've made this huge, seemingly dangerous animal, but he's absolutely safe. You're safe around him. Now, what I think he's likening this beast to, because Leviathan is going to be completely different. And there are reasons for that we will get into in our next session, next week, God willing. But essentially, Leviathan comes out of the sea. The East in that day in particular feared the sea greatly, especially the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, so it makes sense from God that the beast, the more fearsome beast, and the one to me that depicts evil greatly, and sometimes even the devil himself, comes from the sea. Whereas this giant animal we have access to, ready access, in a peaceful area, in a peaceful land and so forth, peaceful situation, and yet, they might cause us fear, but God is essentially saying, no need to fear. I think he's essentially kind of saying, look, I have a strong arm, and yes, all of this, I can see you're convicted, I can see you're cast down and so forth, but remember, I'm your Father. I love you. Yes, I am great. Yes, I am strong. But I'm not here to devour you. I'm not here to devour you. I'm here to walk with you. See now, his strength in his hips and his power in his stomach muscles. Again, it's just strength. He moves his tail like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are tightly knit. So going back to the hippo and the elephant and so forth. So this one would seem closer in line with the elephant, and this really would be his trunk, not really their tails, because their trunks are actually quite strong. But again, I don't really there are times where this wouldn't match a hippopotamus, there are times this wouldn't match an elephant. So I think both the behemoth and Leviathan or something of mystical creatures, especially the Leviathan, which, again, I'm sorry, but we're just going to have to wait for until next week, because the Bible also refers to Leviathan in other areas. Behemoth is here this one time in the Bible. But back in that time, they would, worship these things. And so the behemoth would be, again, like the god of the beasts of the beasts, and so forth. But essentially, God is saying, no need to fear this animal. His bones are like beams of bronze, his ribs like bars of iron. Again, he's just emphasizing the strength of this safe animal. Not a dangerous animal. This is not a beast of prey. He is the first of the ways of God. Only he who made him can bring near his sword. Okay. Much conjecture surrounds this. Okay. He's not saying here that he was the first of my creation. Ultimately, in creation, when God made the beast, he made mankind on the same day. So that's why he says, look now at the behemoth, which I made along with you. And all the beasts were created in the same day man was created, not the fish, and so forth. So he's just saying, he is the first of the ways of God. Only he who made him, God, can bring near his sword. Because this beast is so gigantic. You can't kill this beast with a sword. You can't kill an elephant with a sword. You can't kill a hippopotamus with merely a sword. You're going to have to take many swords, or, something far more fierce than that. Surely the mountains yield food for him, and all the beasts of the field play there. Again, so all has been provided for him, not animals. He's not eating animals, and all the beasts of the field play there. They frolic around this huge animal, seemingly dangerous animal. Absolutely safe. He lies under the lotus tree in a covert of reeds and marsh. So whereas the lion has to go in his dark den and so on, this one shades under a lotus tree. It provides much shade, and they're very tall. So again, there's a huge animal, and this is like the one tree they can find shelter under. The lotus trees cover him with their shade. The willows by the brook surround him. Now, indeed, the river may rage, yet he is not disturbed. He is confident, though the Jordan gushes into his mouth. I love the imagery here. First of all, so any river, specifically that the writer refers to the Jordan, indicates many things. We have mentioned that Job and his friends and so forth aren't of a Hebrew origin, but interestingly, most of them would refer to any river as the Jordan. And so I think the writer's pretty much saying just that, because this beast will be in many rivers. However, indeed, the river may rage, yet he is not disturbed, because, he's solid. So think about a hippo. Think about an elephant. No matter how hard the current is, no matter how fast the current is going, this animal, this beast, this strength that was made from God stands fast, stands firm. He is confident, though the Jordan gushes into his mouth. So, not only is he not swayed by this torrential river, he's just drinking it up. This is a powerful image of this beast who is absolutely safe. Okay. So 24, though he takes it in his eyes, the water, or one pierces his nose with a snare. Now this is, see, God is funny. We need to appreciate the sense of humor that God has. First of all, though he takes it in his eyes, the water, that's annoying, right? And so that's kind of funny. But, or one pierces his nose with a snare. He's essentially picturing this beast who's massive. He's talking about how strong he is, and then he's talking about putting a snare in his nose and like controlling him thereby, kind of a thing. It's a silly idea. It's a silly idea. So again, even if the river may rage, he's not disturbed. He's confident, though he takes it in his eyes, or one pierces his nose with a snare. Even if that were to take place, he is not disturbed. He is absolutely confident, because man is not going to control this animal. Okay, he's absolutely safe. You can walk with him. You can travel with elephants. We've seen these people even ride elephant, especially historically in wars and so forth. They would do this. Because they can be trained, but not so much like the horse. So, as we go into Leviathan, I hope we've made the point that the behemoth, I think, is just kind of a glimpse piggybacking off of what God had said to Job and just reassuring him somewhat, just assuring him that, look, Job, I know you're probably fearing and trembling right now, but look, yes, I'm absolutely all powerful. Yes, I'm full of majesty and splendor. Yes, I am the absolute wise judge of all of heaven and all of earth. And yes, I can tear down and put down the proud with a simple gaze. But I love you. I love you. I am not here to harm you. Walk with me. Find your shade with me. Walk the raging river with me, and I will lap it all up. I will not be dissuaded. I will always be with you. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. Then, just after reassuring him, he shakes him one last time with what he will say about Leviathan. So, as we go into next week, very much encourage you to read this account of Leviathan, see where else the Bible talks about Leviathan, and you'll get a fair glimpse as to how we're going to approach Leviathan next week, God willing. All right, praise God. Let's pray.